Welcome back to Season 3 of Book Eaters Podcast.
Yay!
Here with us today is Michelle, who you must remember from previous seasons, and my friend and future sister-in-law,
What announcements?
Marcia Hudson, who recommended the book that we are going to be talking about tonight. But before we dive in, as we like to do, we would be remiss if we did not mention the absence of Iris Arroyo.
Oh, Iris. Unfortunately, Iris has decided to move to Florida. And so she's no longer going to be part of the Book Eaters podcast, but we miss her immensely and wish that she were here. But we will feel her absence this season.
And hopefully she's listening.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Iris.
All right, so the book that we are going to be discussing today is sort of fascinating.
It's a history of the world in 6 glasses by
That's right.
Tom Standage.
And Marcia read it and for some reason immediately thought of me. And, immediately I thought it would be a great topic for this podcast.
It totally is because it has drinks and it's in a book.
And it's history. And y'all know I love history.
It's completely a Book Eaters book.
So we're going to break from tradition, and instead of making a cocktail, we are going to be drinking all 6 of the drinks featured in this
What
book.
now?
Only 3 of them have alcohol, so I don't think we'll get too crazy.
I mean, we could put alcohol in them. I'm just saying.
All right. Well, what I think is interesting.
If you want to, listeners, don't hold back.
So as someone who loves history, and I know Marcia does too, Michelle,
I love history.
She's a sport.
I like history. I'm a fan of history, especially some of the drinks, which I won't spoil because we're not there yet. But there's one drink in particular that I'm a huge fan of, and so learning all about that history was exciting for me. So
I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
But
Spoiler,
I've often said that I think history, like I have a fantasy history class, and I would love to teach it, but I'm not, that knowledgeable. But I would love someone to teach it somewhere in the world, and I would go.
Right.
Wherein they teach history concurrently. So like what was happening in China at this time that this was happening in India, the time that this was happening in the Middle East, and at the same time this was happening in Germany. You know what I mean? Because you just get segments, but you never compare one civilization to another at that same point in time.
So the book does a terrible job of that. It's very, very, very European based. We get very, very, very few of what's happening in other countries, even though many of these drinks existed there for a long time.
It's a very interesting concept because, and this is a good question for y'all. Do your family or friends have your own sort of time markers?
Mine is generally where I lived at the time. Or in my life, my family, we moved every 2 or 3 years too. We moved a lot. So it was easy to say, okay, well, that's when we lived in this city or on that street.
It's important to note that Michelle was a military brat. Her family was not on the run. So,
yeah.
I have a friend who her time marker is what hairstyle she had. Oh, that's when I had bangs.
Oh. Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
that's when I feathered.
I remember the feather days. It was a battle. It was a lot of morning hairspray, pre-bus, hard times.
But so this book, the time marker is beverages. So as Michelle pointed out, the title of the book is World History, but it doesn't do a great job at that. It's basically world history until Europe was civilized, and then it's just European history.
It's mostly just British history, if we're being honest.
And France.
There wasn't a whole lot of France.
And Greece and Rome.
They talked about Japan briefly. They talked about Americas a little bit at the end, but mostly it was how the British were engaged.
Right, but we'll get more into that as we get into it. Did you want to add anything before we start with our first beverage?
No, I mean, I did feel like they covered a lot of different countries, as the origins, like Iran.
But only at the beginning.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess it's all about kind of, what the written history was at the time. They certainly talk about Mesopotamia a lot and Egypt a lot. He actually has hieroglyphs in the book where they show beer, and how it was one of the earliest forms of writing. So I felt like he did branch out a lot. As far as America, I certainly think there was more that could be discussed, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
It's funny that you should mention beer, because beer is the first drink.
The very first, and as the book says, beer was not invented; it was discovered.
Yes.
Discovered. Yes, because someone was just eating gruel, and then they just decided, I'm done with this gruel, I'm not going to eat it anymore, and put it aside, and then
I'll have that for a snack later.
didn't do the dishes or anything for a couple of days, I'm guessing, and then it fermented, and they were like, well, that looks good, let me pick that back up.
Got to be a bachelor.
I mean, for sure. Sure, yeah.
He probably's like, yeah, it's still good. Like,
And then he was like, oh, I don't feel right.
but I
kinda
like
it. So I got 2 beers for this one. The first one is a very heavily malted beer, which I know the first beers were mostly cereals, but wheats didn't really come into play for a while, and you wouldn't have any hops in the beginning of time, which actually I don't like a hoppy beer. I don't know if you guys do, but this is golden, I don't know, something. What does that say?
Golden Drac.
Golden Drac. It's pretty nice. It was a nice bottle. It's pretty.
That is really good.
It's delicious, actually. I love it.
Okay.
I'm kind
Probably
of a huge fan.
lot better than Bachelor Cave beer,
I mean, yeah.
I'm thinking.
I can kind of put myself back there.
Yeah,
you know?
feeling very, sea shanty.
It's the mug.
Yeah.
And it's so in the book they talk a lot about the cereal grains, the wild grains being used, and that's probably had a lot to do with the nomad lifestyle coming to an end, because they wanted to make sure that they were there to harvest those grains because they'd found this great new.
Yeah, and as soon as they realized they could drink it, they could store the grains longer and get vitamin, rich nutrients from their cup.
Yep.
And their water was safer to drink, and it kind of started really a revolution for civilization.
Not only that, it was all of the classes consumed beer.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the wealthy, like some of the other beverages we'll get to later. Like everyone had access to beer, because beer only existed because of the excess of the cereal grains that were available.
Right, and it was safer to drink than water.
Yep.
Right?
And I had read the term many times, but wasn't sure exactly what it was. Small beer.
Oh, we've talked about this before.
Yeah,
And
Washington's had a recipe for small beer.
And it is just wheat beer.
Well, I mean, it's mostly non-alcoholic-ish, right?
Yeah, it's just watered down. I mean, they even call it, I think D. Jefferson had a recipe for kid beer where you could, they obviously gave it to children too, just watered down, but.
Yeah, I noticed that too when they were talking about the book, that everybody drank beer. Women, children, men.
And the book goes on to talk about, the effect ultimately it had on civilization, how it kind of made everyone sluggish and, started your day off kind of like, ooh, I'm a little drunk. And the kind of long-term effects that, in hindsight, were perhaps a little more visible as times changed and new beverages came in.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Could be drunk all the time.
Did you find out anything about beer that you did not previously know?
I mean, I didn't know a lot of that stuff about beer.
Yeah, I had read that, they thought it was discovered by accident. But I didn't realize the cultural effect, like the omnipresent force it was, especially in the ancient world, from poor to rich to, it being in the hieroglyphs and some of the first written exchanges.
So when you were talking about the hieroglyphs, or when I was listening to that in the audiobook, you know what it made me think of? You know that game we play where you have the wheat and the sheep? Do you know what I'm talking about? And you try to collect them all. It was like that, because they were like currency, right?
Are
It was
you
like,
talking about Settlers of Catan?
yes, I'm talking about Settlers of Catan. 100% I am. Like, that's what it made me think of, because I was like, yeah, because you got to collect the things, and beer was one of them, apparently.
Yeah, and they had, kind of the beginning of currency. They started tallying things, and you had the people that were in charge of the wheat houses, and you had to pay your taxes, and that's what you paid with.
This is good.
You guys, okay, so the next beer is a Hefeweizen, and this is a wheat beer, and the reason I chose this is because Hefeweizen is my favorite kind of beer. This is a Paulaner, which is from Munich, and I noticed that the German beer, I think they use this purity standard from like 1516 or something when they make their beer. So the recipes are very different, and this was brewed in Germany, and I think that's the best Hefeweizen.
Okay, well, let's open them all at the same time.
So, ready?
Okay.
It's not going
This
to
will be
be...
a great sound effect.
Okay, ready?
1, 2, 3.
Oh, that is nice. That's nice. So you notice that this one is very soft. Like, taste it, April.
I don't
Yummy.
really like beer.
Taste it.
Okay.
Taste it. This one is... Oh, gosh. I was going to say this is very smooth and subtle. And there's like a banana flavor in the back.
Oh, I get the
I
banana.
do get the banana, but this is more like beer that I don't like. That's more like, okay, I'm fine.
So what's noticeable about both of these beers is neither one of them are very hoppy. And I don't think hops came into play until much later when they were taking the beer. And this wasn't mentioned in the book.
Yeah, they
but
actually didn't talk about hops.
This is
at all.
something
Did
that
at the end, at the afterward, he talked a lot about the hops.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's my understanding, and I don't know if this is true, if this is just some sort of like weird knowledge that I picked up from hanging out in breweries, but that the hops actually came from when they shipped the beer from England to like America or to like the West Indies or wherever they were shipping it, that they added the hops to keep it more fresh.
Stable.
To keep it fresh from going bad. And so that's where the hops actually came into play with the beer. And then now apparently
They
it's...
ended up liking the flavor.
I mean, I don't. Do you like hoppy
I don't
beer?
like super hoppy beer.
I don't like a hoppy beer.
Yeah.
I prefer either one of these two. Actually, the first one
The first one is my favorite.
is
for
really
sure.
good. I like the malty flavors. But this is a Tripel, so it's probably very high octane. Get you drunk quick like a bunny.
I do feel like it's only 5.5% alcohol.
No, that's this one. That's the Hefeweizen.
Oh,
The
this one.
Tripel
Oh,
is what I'm saying. It's probably a higher octane. You can kind of taste.
I do feel like this would be good for baking.
I bet you would be great for bread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beer
Yeah,
bread.
and they say that beer is just liquid bread. You know?
Yeah.
It is.
So, one of the things that was surprising to me in reading the book is I assumed that wine was older than beer, but
Yeah, that's a weird... I also did not think the beer was the oldest. I would have thought like other forms of alcohol would have been older than beer.
Well, I didn't really get the impression that beer was perhaps older. I think it's more recorded because of Egypt, you know, and the fact that they did have writing and record of it. Certainly, where they had wild grapes growing, there probably was wine.
sort of accidentally
Exactly.
discovered,
Yeah.
just like they did with the cereal grains, but it just didn't, it wasn't from the Fertile Crescent,
Right.
so it didn't spread.
Exactly. And you had people who were super separated, you know, and I mean, really, as far as I know, the oldest written records do come from like Mesopotamia, Egypt,
Right.
you know, and so really that's all we know.
Right.
So, I mean,
Well, that
it's
makes sense,
hard
too.
to say which really came first.
But I mean, like beer, I mean, we're talking just after Neanderthals.
Right.
You know, it was like one of
like-
the
We got on the beer really fast.
We went from hunter-gatherers to
Right.
farmers, and we were like, oh yeah, we can make beer. But
because of beer. Yeah.
I kind of get it though, because like all you had to drink was water,
Right.
because they didn't have juice or anything either.
Well, and
Right.
surely they did have juice, but there's no way that if you had food, that you were going to take that food and turn it into juice.
You were gonna eat that
You were
food.
going to eat it. Yeah.
Right.
You know, and
So-
you knew water can make you sick.
But if you let it sit, or you got the juice from, I guess, would they add water? I guess it's gruel, right? They added water to the cereal grains, and then
Mm-hmm. Make like a soup.
yeah.
Right. With the beer, they even like noticed that using the same
Yes, did improve the
containers
flavor.
improved the flavor of the beer.
I thought it was interesting that they didn't have distilleries though. Like distilleries came way later.
Way
That's
later.
science, okay? You're expecting way too much. Look,
All right.
they literally just learned how to not put tents up every night. You know,
I mean, I guess they finally got to the point where they didn't eat all of their food.
right, You know,
Right.
so, which is amazing in itself. I mean, think about it. If we were cast out, you know, with no modern amenities, how long would we? You know what I mean?
Oh, FYI, April.
People coming up with this shit is always like, who does that?
I feel
I don't
like most people would do better than they think they would do. Like, I feel like...
I feel like the
I-
opposite is true.
Yes.
I feel like the opposite is true. I think we all think that we could manage ourselves in a zombie apocalypse, but at the end of the day, most of us wouldn't make it through the first wave.
Yeah, I used to, you know, I used to do educational interpretation, like, at a historical place, and people were like, oh, I couldn't do it. I was like, you would do it because you would have to, you know, this is what you would do to live, you know. There weren't a lot of vegetarians by choice back then, you know.
Right, but I mean,
100%. I think, I always say that anybody is capable of anything, and I think that if I had to, I would pretty much do whatever I had to do.
Yeah.
If you're sat down in the middle of nowhere, how are you going to find water?
How am I going to find water?
Yeah, how are you going to find water?
I don't know, dude.
See? And then you're going to die. And then you come upon some berries and you're starving. How are you going to know? How are you going to know if you can eat those berries or not? You're going to be desperate. You're going to eat those berries.
I mean, yeah.
If you're lucky, you don't die.
It's going to be blue
And if
lagoon
you're
all over
even
again.
luckier, you have enough that you can save them. And if
they
you're
die in
even
Blue
luckier,
No, but they
the
eat the
saved
berries.
berries will ferment, and then you'll get wine.
Yeah. So it's very lucky that we have beer and wine because a lot of people died along the way, probably.
I mean, I thought that was one of the things that was very interesting too, is they talked about how the advent of these alcoholic beverages actually improved the overall general health
Yeah.
of society, because those parts of it were what helped them get things like water that wouldn't kill them, because they were drinking the alcohol, which was killing all of the germs that was killing them.
Yeah, and it just created a sense of community too, which ultimately, I mean, one could argue was good for humanity.
Absolutely.
Living in groups and taking care of one another and not having the entire brunt of your existence on your very back every day,
It was really interesting that those things became currency. Like,
yeah.
alcohol was currency. You got a day's wage by not only being paid for food, but also ale. So a day's work, you'd get a beer, or I don't think wine was in the same way. He didn't say, right? It was just beer.
No, but beer, especially in Egypt, that was part of, because it was very, very community driven.
Right.
You did these things and you did them for the good of Egypt and you did them for the good of your pharaoh, and you got beer.
Right.
You got a ration.
But wine, on the other hand, was more classist. Right? So the wealthy, in the beginning, the wealthy only had the wine.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a wealthy wine here that we're drinking now, April?
It is on the higher end for me, in that
Okay.
it was almost a $50 bottle.
Holy shit.
That is some wealthy wine.
It is a red blend called The Prisoner. And what I would like for us to consider is a bit of a classist drink. It also ushered in a period of not just about survival, but revelry and big thoughts.
What do they drink to in the book? To health and to
I do remember that. But
beer and bread? What did they drink
to beer and bread. To the beer and bread.
To beer and bread.
They also referred to the wine as the excellent beer of the mountains. I enjoyed that
Oh.
part.
I also like the naming conventions. They were like, this is the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to go back to beer for a minute, I do love the beer names of Mesopotamia. Like the Heavenly Potion.
Right?
The
Yes. This is very good wine and very good beer.
The wine is amazing.
Yeah.
I wanted to
It's super good.
make you my prisoner.
So, where did this wine come from?
Because that mattered. That mattered, right?
That
so
was huge.
In the book, when they talked about wine, they cared more about where the wine was from, because they couldn't
had
store it. They
the
could,
special jars to indicate where it came from.
right, because that was what made it cool. It was if it was from far
California.
away.
We
California.
still have special jars to indicate where they're from.
We still do that.
Isn't that a cool label?
So I thought that was funny, because now we do that too. We do it with beer, and we do it with booze, and we do it with wine. When how much things are cost is based on either how long it's been sitting in the barrel or where it's from.
Yeah.
What vintage?
Unless it's
what,
a Beaujolais.
because the other thing they talked about with wine was how long it had been sitting in the barrel, right?
Yeah.
What year it was and where it's from. Those are still things that exist today.
Yes.
We still are very snooty about that now.
Yes. I'll tell you what was most interesting to me was the symposiums.
Oh yeah.
And so in Greece and later Rome, they had the watering of the wine.
Right.
Which Marcia and I were talking about. We both started sort of doing that to try to moderate
Yes.
ourselves.
It's a good trick.
Not realizing, did the book give you the idea, or had you already?
The book actually did give me the idea to water. My husband makes fun of me. He's like, stop adulterating that wine. But I'm like, it's going to help me enjoy it longer,
Yeah.
It's a good trick at parties, too, because, you can have a glass of wine and feel like you have a glass of wine, but you're not really having too much wine.
I like to have a glass of wine and then a glass of water. Now, whiskey, I've recently found is delicious, watered down. But
Yes.
wine, I like to have in its full potency. And then after the glass of wine, I'll have a glass of water and then another glass of wine.
One thing
keep them separated.
that this book really helped me understand is like humanity has been in a battle with itself since the dawn of time.
Yes.
To justify augmented reality for itself. It's
Yeah.
like, is it okay to feel like this? Is
The
it
heart
bad?
wants what the heart wants. And
You
we're
know?
going to find a way to make it okay.
I mean, I feel like, after we got past the point of where we needed to do it in order to, like, live because it was killing the bacteria and we understood it, then we're like, well, is it still okay for us to feel, like, like the Native Americans, they felt like it took them to another reality where they were able to have a spiritual existence. But that's not the way, I mean,
and that,
I think about it.
Was taken advantage of, you know? It's a part
we'll
of their
get
culture.
to that.
We'll get to that. Yeah, we're skipping ahead.
What I thought was interesting is that, so in ancient Greece, they used wine to facilitate stimulating conversations.
Discourse.
And they had what they called symposiums.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very ritualistic thing where they had these, they called them craters, and a very specific amount of wine that you should drink and a very specific ratio of wine to water, because they did water their wine.
Yes.
Because they didn't want to be barbarians.
And they actually thought that drinking beer was barbaric. Once wine came into the picture, all of a sudden beer was a barbaric practice.
Because of the gods, the Bacchus, and, only...
I thought that was really interesting how the spiritual realms came in every time a new beverage was...
Yes.
Somehow the gods got involved. But also, with wine, how they would have a party, and, like, these people got the good wine, these people got the medium wine, and these people got the shite wine. Like, what was that about?
Invited to the party.
Right. Right. But...
It was the recently freed men who got the bad wine. But, at least they had their freedom, whatever. You're at a party. You don't get the great wine, but you got your freedom.
You got to, and you got to watch your betters.
Right.
Have a good time.
One day you might have the good wine.
Right. But it was because, this is when you really start to see culture. Mm-hmm. It's not just survival anymore. Now it is about deeper meaning. And so you'd have these symposiums, and they'd have this ratio of water to wine, because, and this is the part that really got me.
Right.
The symposiarch, who was like the ringleader of the show.
Mm-hmm.
He figured out the correct dosage for everyone.
Everyone?
Carousing in the street and burning down buildings.
Like, Marcia's a lightweight. Water her wine.
Yeah. I know that I would be a terrible symposiarch. But I would love to bring the idea back. I could just safely enter the symposiarch's hand, and he will make sure that I ride that perfect wade the entire night.
I trust you, symposiarch.
We need
guide me.
We need to move on now. I don't want to take time away from our next drink, which is
Grog.
Which I was super surprised about. I'm going to be honest with you. I always thought grog was like a type of beer.
I thought grog was a type of wine. I thought it was a mulled wine.
Whenever I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, I'll have a grog. I always thought it's like some cheesy, lame, low-class beer, but it's not.
Yeah.
What? Is that what you've made for us?
I have made us some grog,
Oh!
and I even went as far to buy Navy strength rum. Pusser's rum is what it's called, and
wow.
Apparently it is the rum that, so when the British Navy stopped issuing rum, I guess they figured it was bad for sailors,
I mean, they're not all going to be limeys anymore.
Yeah. So Pusser's came up and was like, you know what? We're going to preserve this rum. And so they basically took the recipe from the British Navy and recreated their own rum brand, which apparently is a blend of 12 rums. And it is Navy strength, so it's very strong.
Is it like overproof rum? Yeah. And she has made us some grog, which in the book it was explained to us is actually rum with lime juice and sugar, right? And water.
To make it healthy.
And the modern day version is a mojito.
That's right. And this is why sailors were called limeys, right? Because they drank the lime and they didn't get the scurvy in the sea. And that's why the British Empire won over... Who was it that they were fighting? The French. Because the French were just drinking beer.
There was wine, but it was certainly an advantage, And I mean, you could say that there's probably other advantages. The British
French
naval fleet
won what?
The war, whatever war it was, or whatever I don't remember.
Well, I do remember the British fleet had the V formation, which we studied extensively in 9th grade history. So I remember that. They were pretty undefeatable, but they also apparently didn't have scurvy.
It's all about the V and scurvy.
Well, first
The V and the scurvy. Oh my gosh.
So let's just clear it up that the next part is spirits and the process of distillation.
And we're going to talk specifically about rum.
I mean,
Well, let's back up for a minute and just explain that.
Let's drink the drink.
Okay.
Let's try
drink the drink.
Let's try the drink. Okay. I'm sorry, April.
it's strong. I have a hard time believing this is actually what they drank.
Ooh, Danani.
Wow.
That's actually pretty good.
It is good.
It is good.
And I'm going to be my own symposiarch with that because before we get to, this.
All right, you
rum,
go ahead. I'm sorry
rum
for interrupting you.
I did not realize the significance of rum.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into that, it is the process of distillation.
That is absolutely fascinating. And
yes, this is when that happened.
Yeah, so distillation, I actually found it super cool that eyeliner, coal eyeliner, is from a distillation process.
I caught that from the book too, and I was like, oh, coal, Kohl.
Kohl. And I guess it was in vogue in Arab world.
Like department store.
Well, I don't...
Okay, that might be a bridge too far.
KHOL.
Yes.
Look at you with your ASL.
I'm sorry, I'm drunk.
No, I love it when you...
I thought it was interesting that the Arabic world, which actually had forbade consumption of alcohol, went on to produce the science that actually ultimately led to spirits.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought it was super cool that they actually invented eyeliner.
Probably one of, yes.
In a way.
I love eyeliner.
Well, they did actually invent eyeliner.
I also had I don't know why I didn't figure this out sooner, but that's why they call a still is because it distills alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, that checks
I didn't think
out.
about that. But that makes sense.
I mean, I always kind of assumed that.
I never did until this book. Oh, so we're like a full, the whole, waning moon, full moon, waxing moon. We did the whole witch crone, the full
maiden.
cycle.
Are we
Witch
getting
crone
into
maiden.
Gustav Klimt?
We did the whole cycle
The
of
3 stages of woman.
Exactly.
Very Mo and
Lost the
Curly.
plot.
We did the three cycles of you didn't pick it up from the book, but you just always assumed. I never assumed, but I picked it up from the book, and you never picked it up or inferred it from the book. It just now came to you.
Because you said it.
Right.
Because you told me.
So you see what I'm saying?
I see
It's
it.
our
The
own
whole.
Fertile Crescent right here.
It's very exciting.
Yes.
It's very exciting.
Very short-lived fertile crescent. Very 30 seconds.
Fertile nonetheless.
Small explosion in the course of the universe.
Right, exactly. So that is the next part of the book is the distillation.
Yes.
And then so the drinks got much, much stronger.
Which has been in contrast to everything that we had read about before, where humanity was in this great battle with, should we get fucked up? And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah,
we should. We totally should.
Let's totally get fucked up.
Right.
But we're jumping ahead because we
got to go back to distillation.
Right. The distillation
Rum.
happened. And so there must have been some distillation that happened before rum and slave trade because brandy.
Yes. They started with brandy wine. They started
distilling wine.
I guess in the Arab world they were distilling things mainly because of fashion. They wanted eyeliner. I don't know if that's entirely true, but they were definitely distilling eyeliner.
We all want eyeliner.
Yes, exactly. And
I've never learned to put it on.
They discovered very early on that it looked great, and they just, were distilling
when properly applied, it does.
I love my eyes.
You have beautiful eyes.
So I like to wear the eyeliner to punch them up.
Well, I mean, I want to punch my eyes up too, but
Your eyes
I
are
can't
also
figure out
really
how to
pretty.
do it.
You have gorgeous green eyes.
I can't.
Very lovely.
I can't figure it out though. When I put it on, it just looks like I drew a circle around
I
my
can't tell you
eye.
how many
these
YouTube
go
videos there are out there.
I've watched them. I've watched them.
It is hard. It is hard, but
especially your left eye. I mean, what are you supposed to do?
The important thing is to open your mouth and tell
go full Picasso with it.
you gotta open your whole jaw to make the space.
Yeah, because clearly your eye open. If your eyes are open and your mouth is open,
it tightens the skin.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
I'm a big
My
fan of tight
experience
lining.
is that if my mouth is
Tight
open,
lining.
I love it. Yeah.
Oh my god.
what?
Tight
She
lining.
said tight lining like it's a thing. Is it a
It
thing?
is a thing, yeah. It's
freaking
changed
thing.
my eyeliner world. So the world discovers, this distillation process makes things stronger, and so obviously booze wasn't. They discussed that. I thought it was super interesting that Muhammad was like, booze is bad, and it was a very specific incident that he cited for the reason, and it apparently is hotly debated in the Muslim community as to why booze is bad. And Muhammad, I guess there was a fight between two of his followers, and so he outlawed alcohol, allegedly, but there was a discussion whether he outlawed alcohol or did he outlaw drunkenness, because apparently Muhammad was known to drink date wine, which is something I would love to try.
Yeah, but they said in the book the palm date wine
was much
is
weaker.
the loophole.
Right. But
because it's not real wine.
But it is alcoholic.
So in that case, I'm just going to solve Islam's problems right now.
Okay.
I'm going to say drunkenness is outlawed.
Well, that's what they discussed.
There were many discussions.
Well,
I mean,
but they
later
haven't-
we'll talk about more
They
discussions
haven't
of it.
heard my decision on the matter.
Okay.
And that's
What
what's
is that?
been
What does that
missing.
make you? What was the word you used before? When we were talking about wine. Gosh, I've already forgotten. Remember
What was the point of it?
Cinca.
the Cinco?
Oh, the symposium.
The
Symposiarch.
symposiarch.
Yeah.
You
I was
haven't
going
heard
to
the
call you a sycophant, but I knew that was not right.
Depends on the
The
circumstance.
symposiarch's decision on the situation.
Y'all, this is when the podcast gets good.
Well, Grog.
The grog has definitely pushed me over the edge from
Imagine.
feeling good to wow, you're drunk.
Well,
Yeah,
so
I know.
before we
I
could
can't
just-
imagine trying to boat with this.
I mean, can you
Like-
imagine trying to steer a ship?
No.
Which way is the?
Well, no, they would do this like off duty for sure.
no.
I don't think so. It's
No.
not the ration.
I've seen a lot of pirate movies. They're just drinking all the time.
This is what they're drinking. And then somewhere along the way, they ran upon some mint, and they were like, let's put some mint in this.
I have to
And
feel like
mojito was
the
born.
ratio to water was.
I gotta be
Greater.
honest with you. I feel
I
like
feel like probably so, but this was a recipe from the internet, and it's probably, catered to the modern day where we're luxurious and we can get drunk at our leisure and we don't have to worry about getting eaten
Or steering a ship.
or killed by
feel like
pirates.
adding
or
mint
hate- or
to any drink
hoisting a
is
sail.
probably a plus.
Yes.
I love mint. Mint is totally my brand.
It is very good.
It's very on brand for Michelle.
I definitely think, to that point, I think that the human justification to being inebriated came with comfort.
And escapism.
Yes.
There's a level of privilege that is associated with
Exactly.
being inebriated.
All right.
All
Anyways,
right. So we should move on. Probably.
Well, but let me just make this interesting juxtaposition.
Oh,
to what we were
juxtaposition.
to what we were just talking about with wine and it being a luxury and blah 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 versus let's give it to the slaves so they don't know how fucked up their lives are.
They totally did that shit. I actually appreciated that in the book. I was a little upset about how England-centric it was, but I did like how they talked a lot about, the book talked a lot about how slavery played into rum, specifically, molasses,
And
all
how
of
cheap
that.
it was to make, because before it was from brandy, which
Right,
was very,
very
expensive.
expensive.
Now they're just making it from the dregs of
Sugar
sugar cane.
Right, so they're using the sugar
Whatever
cane,
they
what's
would
left
normally
over.
throw away, which here's an interesting correlation to modern day chicken wings. Back in the day,
Well, let's talk about chicken wings.
back in the day, they would just throw chicken wings away. It was considered
Yes.
just and then like some savvy restaurateur in Buffalo, New York,
Yes.
was like, you know what? Instead of peanuts or corn nuts or bread, I'm going to send these chicken wings to the table,
Right.
spiced up right.
Right, but
And they
just so
took
you
off
know,
like a
the
shot.
original hot sauce was Frank's hot sauce, and it's the best hot sauce, and that was what was put on the original chicken wings.
She leaned all close to the mic.
That was. I
She
feel
leaned in
like
super close to the mic.
I
for
feel like
that.
she has an opinion about
I
that.
feel like she was very, very excited about
I
Frank's
feel like
hot sauce.
she's not
I love-
conflicted
yeah.
about the
No,
controversy. She
no.
has the line in the sand was drawn, and
It's
she
the
chose.
best.
So I was thinking
Aside.
about what is that soup, like albondigas or whatever that soup is? It's like made from like intestines and stuff because people who are poor, that's what they got. They got the leftovers.
I think you're talking about menudo.
Menudo, that's what I'm talking about.
It's just meatball soup, but
Albondigas.
But
all right.
menudo, yes.
This is what happens when I drink too much. I forget the
I
names
love
of
it.
the soup. I forget the
love
names
it.
of the soup.
Tell us about the menudo.
The menudo. I mean, it's a great hangover remedy for those of you who are going to be drinking along with us this season. But also, yeah, it's made from like leftover nonsense because I think that's what poor people got. They got what's left over after the rich people had their fancy shares.
Well, I don't necessarily think that, but I do think that the average family certainly made use of everything that they had. You have to think about when people got things, they only got them for a season, and most people couldn't afford, especially an animal. Most people had like a pig, they maybe had a goat. I'm serious. They maybe had a goat. I mean, they certainly didn't have a cow. And if you did have a cow, you were wealthy.
You were milking that cow.
I feel like even before a pig, you'd have a chicken.
Well, I mean, chickens didn't
like
really fall into fashion until much later in American history. Before that, they ate pigeons.
How do you know so much about farm animals?
Because I used to be an educational interpreter for the colonial and revolutionary periods, and I also know a lot about World War II because I played Rosie the Riveter.
I feel like
about goats.
I feel like April did not do a very good
goats
introduction.
And pigs and sheep. Actually, sheep are my favorite. I think sheep actually are the oldest herded animal.
I hate sheep.
No.
Why do they hate sheep?
They're so dumb.
They're not dumb. Sheep have the oldest established connection with humanity. They're the oldest animal that we have actually, what's the word?
Okay, I feel like that's like
herded.
saying, "Oh, I love Sesame Street," because that's the
Sheep aren't
first like wider worldview I could ever see.
Why are you talking shit about Sesame Street?
Sheep are
B,
very smart.
sheep are cool. Like,
And they're bound to us. They're
Randall
bound to us.
Thor is a sheep herder. Come on now.
They're bound to us in a way that we have like manipulated their bodies to the point where they can't live in the wild. Sheep cannot be on their own. They need us. They have
But
to.
sheep have lied to me.
Well,
They lied to you?
they have to be sheared.
They are not cute, cuddly. No, they're not. They have fleas.
They have deep. No, they don't. They have lanolin. They do not have fleas. If you've met a sheep with fleas, I would like to meet that sheep and the owner because there's something terribly wrong. Okay.
All right, let's leave sheep. Well, before we move on from because this thankfully ends our alcoholic.
Right, and we're going to
drink.
move into the new drinks.
But before we do,
Right.
I just want to say one other interesting fact.
We didn't actually talk
What's
about
the next drink?
for a lot.
We didn't talk about what a lot.
Grog? We drank the grog. We saw what it did to us.
I know.
But what was interesting to me.
No wonder they got lost on their way to America. I mean.
Right. Also, Barbados, uninhabited. So I felt a weird sense of peace about that.
Was it uninhabited?
Yeah, that's what the book said. I don't know if it's true. It's just what this book said.
I felt like there were native people there.
Yeah.
No,
feel like
they
they're-
brought them in. They brought them in.
So there was just some island that no one lived on?
Now they did bring them from Africa.
Yeah, they were slaves.
Because
sure.
they brought in slaves.
Sure.
Apparently, sugar plantations were the worst plantations to work on. They were the most brutal. And
Okay,
the
but
working
that's not.
conditions
I didn't
were
want to think
terrible.
about that. I wanted to think about the fact that at least in one circumstance, a place was found, and the indigenous people. There were no indigenous people.
They weren't given any blankets with smallpox.
It was a blank canvas. Now, sure, they chose to bring in
All right. So
subjugated people from the outside, but at least it was the subjugated people from before. It wasn't newly subjugated people.
the next drink,
Is that a weird sense of peace that I got from that?
a little bit. Because I didn't get any peace from it because of the slavery. But that's cool. I mean, you gotta get something from something.
I mean, at least it wasn't like two types of slaves. Because it did say in the book that earlier they tried to enslave other people from the Caribbean and they died out too fast because their immune systems couldn't handle the Europeans. So they had to bring in African slaves who had already acclimated to the dirty
Assorted
Europeans.
plagues.
Yeah.
What's the next drink?
Is
Tea?
it tea?
No,
not
coffee.
Coffee! What do you remember about the coffee section, Marcia?
Well, I mean, coffee, apparently, once again, super ancient drink. Wow, look at these
Gorgeous.
beautiful
Don't you wish you had your
coffees.
camera right now?
I do have my camera. But, yeah.
These are pretty.
They're
It looks
beautiful.
almost like pudding on top.
Yes.
Okay, so
What is this, April?
Dalgona.
Am I supposed to drink this with a spoon?
Is this a style of coffee?
Yes,
or?
it is a Korean whipped coffee.
It's Korean whipped.
Very, very different. Opposite end of the spectrum from the coffee that was discussed in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because apparently coffee filters weren't invented until the 19th century.
Oh.
So
Right.
before that, it was a very, almost like the beer.
Chewy.
Because the beer had all the chaff in it.
Yeah.
You know? But anyways, modern recipe, but I thought, let's fancy it up. So this is a whipped coffee served on top of some almond milk. And you just want to kind of... The
almond milk is definitely
You
an
stir it
invention of
up?
the
Yeah,
modern
you
world.
stir it up because the whipped coffee part is very, very strong. So you want to...
Whipped coffee. You whipped this coffee yourself?
So how
did.
did you make this nonsense?
Yes.
Like, explain to me the process and how it goes.
So that's how you know that it's... I made a mess. If you need a straw, let me know. Because it's like Starbucks. They put the shit on the top and you really need it all mixed.
There's cinnamon in it.
They drink the beer with straws too in the olden days.
Yes, they did. To prove that it was, not to
Also
prove,
because all the shit was floating on the
but
top.
it certainly made things more comfortable to know that it wasn't poison. Apparently there's a lot of poisoning back then. Mm-hmm. Wow. April.
This is fucking fancy.
Yeah.
So, coffee was allegedly, once again, I think perceived as a gift from the gods. And the first record of coffee berries being discovered was by a sheep herder.
A sheep herder.
And
Go sheep herders. What?
the sheep herder noticed that when his sheep ate the berries from a specific plant, they were frisky.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I guess coffee berries had been eaten, but no one thought to put them into a drink until someone thought to put them into a drink.
So there were two legends they talked about in this story, and I only really heard the one about the minister or the preacher that had given them to a Sunday school class. That one I had heard before, where he had found the berries and he'd given them to the Sunday school class, and they ate them, and then they're like super hyper.
I remember that.
You don't remember this in the story?
Mm-mm. And I don't think it was in the book either.
It was in the book.
There were two versions.
Bruce Lee.
Okay.
It was in the book.
Bruce
Do not even start with your...
is still drinking grog.
Okay. It was in the story they talked about how the Sunday school teacher gave the
Not a
berries
Sunday school teacher.
to the students, and the
You're
students...
conflating two stories.
Whatever. And they ate the cocoa berries, and they were like, woo-woo, we're paying attention, we're in. And so then he gave them to the people. And then the second story that they talked about was the guy who was lost in the desert. He was dropped off in the desert.
That wasn't from this book.
It was 100% from this book.
I don't remember that part.
I feel like it's weird that you guys don't know this, because I listened to the book yesterday. He dropped them
Somebody
off.
call Mr. Standish.
He dropped them off in the desert, and then when he was dropped off in the desert, he ate some of the berries and then gave him the nourishment to come back. He was supposed to starve to death in the desert as a punishment, and when he came back, they were like, "Oh, it's from God. God said that he should live." And then they started giving
That was
everyone
not
the
from
berries.
this book.
It was 100% from this
Nope.
book.
The sheep randomly eating the berries.
I don't
from the
remember
book,
that part,
but then
actually.
also the actual sheep herder having the berries, and suddenly he had more stamina.
Dude, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right, we're
Well,
not going to
I
belabor.
think the most important fact from the coffee chapter was the fact that before this, the only things that humans had discovered beverage-wise is that water can make them sick, beer eased their woes, wine made them happy, liquor made them drunk, and then all of a sudden coffee made them alert.
Clarity became...
In vogue. And
They would
so-
drink it in the mornings, and they'd
Yeah,
be like, "Woo."
only the uncouth just want to be blotto. Now it's all about really being sharp and
Right.
honed in to what's happening.
And then that
it was
became
like the 80s of world history.
Exactly.
the addiction of having a coffee every morning in order to get your job done.
Yeah, they did notice the workers perform.
Yes.
Now, this is where they talked about, maybe I read a different book, I don't know. But this is where they talk about they had the factory They started setting up factories, and then they gave the people coffee.
Well, that was tea.
Oh, that was
what they
tea,
gave them the coffee. But what was interesting across all of these things, and something that is really a modern of the marvel of the modern world, is the fact that we have safe drinking water. So when I started this book, I thought, oh, water is going to be one of the things, because obviously water is the driving force of humanity, and all civilizations from the dawn of time have always set up near water, Fertile Crescent, there's water available. We have to have water, and as it turns out, water has been the bane of our existence. And we finally have safe drinking water. All of a sudden, not only is the water boiled, so the water is safer, and I don't even think by this point they figured out that there were microorganisms living in water that made them sick. That was so much later. And so here they have this drink that they can have safely, and they're alert and they're perky and they're making it through their workday by the time it's time. So
they can do like numerals.
Yeah, I know.
I love the coffee houses bit though. Like when it talks about the coffee houses and all the stuff that happened in the coffee houses. Yeah.
It was a very beatnik
and like
sort of.
the origin of
social
like
revolution.
Some great cool stuff in London, like the stock exchange.
Yeah.
Yes. So what happened for our listeners who are being so tolerant right now?
I've not read the book.
The coffee became a thing.
Coffee.
And there was a lot of like drama around that and getting it out amongst the people.
There was some definite.
Coffee houses started opening up, and you'd go only men, women weren't allowed. And based off of your political beliefs or your philosophies or your
interests, it was like the first fandom stuff. It was like, is your fandom poetry?
And they make
then go to this one. Is your fandom politics? Then go here. Is your fandom trading stocks? Then this is the coffee house.
And that's
for
where
you
get the most recent news.
Right.
And they would.
And they got their mail.
Yeah, and you could get mail delivered to your to your coffee house. So you'd cut only the men, because
of course the men
because the women were busy.
And the women were grumpy about it. They're like, coffee is bad. It's for the devil.
Oh, that was what was so interesting to me. Like, I never knew that coffee was supposed to cause impotence.
Well, they said it dried their men out, and then they came home.
Yeah, like women wrote a whole like treatise.
Yeah, there was a thing where women were
women coffee has to stop, or humankind will become extinct because
men
our
not want to have sex with us
wombs
anymore.
will not be filled with fruit.
I thought it was interesting too, again going back to the Muslim world, when coffee became prevalent there, very popular, an alternative to alcohol, and it started becoming hip, and they were like, well, is this an intoxicant? Is this something?
Drug though?
Well, it is, but
it's not making you drunk.
Right. So once again, we're back to the Muslims saying, well, is this something that would Muhammad have approved of this? And so they had to outline, well, what intoxicates. And they outlined, well, these are the things that would intoxicate a person. And some of them were rather interesting, not being able to tell a man from a woman, not being able to readily reply to an answer. And there were like 7 things. And
it's interesting because we have a similar thing in healthcare where it's like, are you alert and oriented? Can you, we have like a checklist for are you having a stroke?
I mean, coffee definitely would help with those, even if you were having a stroke, possibly.
Well,
Can you recognize a man from a woman, though? I feel like there's a story behind that one.
I mean, I feel like in this day and
never
age...
again!
In this day and age, we're sort of opposed to that. Like, stop misgendering me, you fuck.
Does anyone want to say anything else about coffee? Because there was so much to it.
There was a lot to it.
So yes, it was very lame as a raw. We're all in the coffee house and we're thinking these great thoughts and we're going to have a revolution, man.
Well, I thought the storming of Bastille, the fact that it originated at a coffee house, I don't know much
2
about...
arms!
Yeah, it was amazing. And the fact that the fact that people can gather, and the speed at which we gather now is so much faster. But the speed then at which people gathered was alarming to people in charge. The fact that people would gather and these hot topic items would fly about the room, and the fact that all of a sudden they recognized the power of the people, which had not been something that had even come into play because they were plying them with alcohol.
And the people
realized since the dawn of time. I mean,
their power together.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. The
fact
fact that...
yes, I am one man, but if I unite my voice with others,
And we could storm the Bastille.
we can storm the Bastille and overthrow the government.
Yep. And that all...
And that's why the government was like, oh, we got to shut down these coffee houses because they're going to overthrow us.
Pretty much.
But
Yeah.
they did not succeed.
But they tried really hard. And then people were like, yeah, we don't care about what you say. And they were like, fuck. All right, well, promise us that you won't do it. And they were like, okay.
And then, okay, all right, so tea happened.
And then
Oh,
tea happened. So
tea
what
is the dirtiest of the lot, I think.
I have
think
prepared
tea.
for you a green tea, which is my least favorite kind of tea.
But I felt like they were all green tea.
The green
That's
tea,
what I didn't know.
green tea was the first prevalence of tea. If you notice in your tea here, there's some tea flakes inside because back then they didn't strain it very well. And
Are we going to
also-
read tea leaves at the end of this?
No.
Oh.
So if you notice that green tea has a very different flavor. It's very light compared to black tea, and it has a weird aftertaste.
Nathan, my fiance, loves green tea.
This is a beautiful tea.
Do
It
not
has
like
a lovely earthiness to it. What is this tea?
green cha. I don't know.
Nate, she does her own.
It's very good.
She's like a teasy art.
So earlier, when we were talking about that I had a favorite drink, it was tea. I wasn't teasing. Haha, teasing. Tea is my favorite. And I don't like green tea. I prefer black tea, and then white tea, and then green tea. But we all know that it's all the same tree.
I did
Just
not know
different
that
stages of the
Same.
development.
until this book, in which they described the Japanese and the Chinese, but it didn't become really ceremonious until Japan, and
I don't know that was necessary.
so well, I'm a little.
Yeah.
The Japanese had like a lot of ceremony, and they would just grow it like in their backyard,
Yeah.
And then when they wanted some tea, they could pick a couple of leaves. Didn't know that.
So
Black tea is just green tea that has been left to oxidize overnight, people.
Right, and white tea, they didn't talk about this in the book, but just for relevance sake, white tea is just the buds of the tea, and it can only be picked at certain times when it's first budding.
Oh, so it's even greener than green.
So it's a different, so it's a more delicate tea than green tea, but it's more rare because it can only happen during a certain specific time when the buds are blooming.
I will never drink white tea.
Why?
For the same reason I will never eat veal. Because you're just killing something off before it's even had a chance.
Okay, so I feel like a couple of things. So first of all, veal is particularly cruel because the animal is forced to sit in a dark black box for whatever and tortured, whereas the buds of white tea are just growing in the sunshine.
No, they don't get a chance.
I'm perfectly happy
They don't get a chance.
until the moment they are plucked.
No, as soon as they poke their little heads out to see what the world's about. Tea!
And,
Tea will make of you.
and white tea is
Vegan area is hitting you hard, man.
white tea is quite delicious. Green tea has like a weird sort of taste to it. I don't really enjoy per se, but it's interesting because people think that there are a million different kinds of tea when really there's just one kind of tea, and then many of the teas that we think of as teas are not actually teas. They're just herbs that we put in water and drink with them.
Yeah, they talk about that a bit in the book, the type, the plant that it comes from, and the fact that it only grew in certain regions. And tea to me was the most brutal part of the book. Like,
More than slavery.
More than rum.
Well, yes, because, to be honest, slavery had been an ingrained part of the world for a long, long time. And
Oh, that was interesting. I always thought that the pyramids were built by slaves. This book says they're not. That they were paid.
well, they were paid with rations. All slaves were paid with rations.
With
But
beer.
They had a more hierarchical approach to society. You were born into your whatever,
Your role.
Yeah, exactly. And so in a way we could say modern day they were slaves, but back then they probably just, were born into that and that's all they knew. But the tea chapter particularly hit me because I got into like this whole opium war phase, and I got
yeah.
If you're talking about British trading, for
Yes.
sure,
Well,
that's
the
dark,
East
dark,
India.
dark.
the East India
They were
trade company, the British Tea Company. And all of this came from the fact that
Avarice and greed.
Britain liked tea. I mean, they liked
Which
tea
was just
so much.
was just a freaking fad too. It was like some random queen was like, "Yeah, I like tea," and they're like, "We want to be like you and like tea as well."
It
It had to be more to it than
No,
that.
No, it's
it
never
was- it
more
was-
than that. That's always what it is. It's always like, "Oh, that's the new hot thing. We want to do the new hot thing. The new hot thing is tea," and then it just endured.
Well, according to
be clear,
this
it's fantastic.
book, there was a particular king whose name escapes me, who had a fondness for tea, and they already had established trade with China to, get this tea that everyone was loving, and the king started to give the British Tea Company all this power. Like,
Yeah.
they went beyond being
Yeah,
a
he was like,
trading-
"You can totally go to war for us." That's
yeah,
cool.
you can
That's
go to
cool. We're in.
war. You can establish not continents, but you can establish. You can domain for us elsewhere, and so all of a sudden, I know, colonial.
Welcome to Book
I
It's
know.
really hard after the grog. There was
It's the
no,
grog.
there's no more talking intelligently after the grog.
So,
Although Marcia's doing
this
a
is what we
bang up
do.
job, a bang up job.
This is what we do.
They were
Yeah.
they were able to establish colonies all of a sudden in the
Right.
name of the king in the pursuit of tea, and in doing so, they were able to basically screw China over. Like,
Jesus, right? Like they were like,
Okay,
"Let's go
but
to war."
China
then
deserved it.
no,
How
they
did
did
China
not.
deserve it?
China was like, we don't
I
want
feel like
you
we
bringing
think-
opium into us. Okay,
They did China
So-
so
okay.
wrong. They did China
Sure,
so wrong.
Sure.
China was like, "Hey, no drugs," and they were like, "Or drugs."
Okay.
and you just take it because we want your tea.
But before
and we
that,
have more
China
weapons
was
than
all
you.
like, "There's nothing that you could possibly do that's as good as what we do."
But that
Fuck
was
you.
that was 100% true though. Like they were way
Imagine-
ahead.
This is what was interesting to me. Imagine.
they actually weren't way ahead. Apparently, when they actually went to actual war, China was like met with like far superior
Yeah.
like
Oh, yeah,
weapons,
like
military.
later, but that was like
weapons.
that was like centuries
And then
later.
apparently
China
also
has
dolls
always been
or
very
something.
isolationist. China has always
But
been
that's
very.
what's interesting to me. So you look at China, very isolationist. Like the very first people who started coming, like, nope, you're not good enough.
And they finally opened themselves up to international trade, and international trade is
Okay,
like, hey,
but-
try some opium. And China's like, we don't want that. And they're like, no, you're getting opium.
No, they'd already tried opium and figured out it was bad.
Yeah, that's what happened. Is that people started getting sick, and they were like, "No more
Nope,
opium."
no, we're outlawing it.
And then
because-
England was like, "Yeah, some opium.
This shit will fuck
or
you
some
up. We know better."
tea. What do you think?"
But what was interesting to me, okay, you have China, who, when the British came a calling, were like, nope, we're good without you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the Native Americans, who had the opposite approach. When British came a calling, they're like, oh, come on in, we'll teach you everything we know. This is corn, this is maize, this is, we have turkeys that just and then both got fucked.
Yeah, I mean the British.
So when the British come a calling, there's no right.
historically,
Just cut them off at the head.
Historically, it's true. If they come with their flag, you send them away. But I think that nowadays they're not such assholes as they used to be.
Because they don't have any power
Okay,
anymore.
but also,
and
give them the power back and they will do that shit again.
So
You
what
think
was
that I don't think that Britain wants to be imperialistic anymore.
So-
I think America wants to be imperialistic. I think
yeah.
it's very much
Which would
in.
make a great segue into the soda section.
No, hang on. I have more to say about the tea section.
Okay, all right, go ahead. Go ahead.
God, she's trying to cut
But
my
she started
sections.
bringing up
She's
imperialism.
trying to cut my section short. What the
Well,
fuck?
you tried to cut my section short earlier.
No, I did not. It ended naturally.
Okay, did you even set the timer this time?
I did set the timer.
Because we've been talking about
I set the timer.
what's
I
the
didn't
time?
start it. So the cola section.
Okay, so soda water gets invented, not discovered. They were working hard on that shit.
Apparently, it was a byproduct of beer, and so this guy Priestley, and he
Beer
was a
again.
clergyman,
Sweeps in.
and he started noticing these bubbles that would come up in, I guess, this beer making process. And he got really into it, and he went down there and he started, I don't know, just screwing around. I mean, so much of humanity is just screwing around. And like he goes down there and he lights a candle over it, and then he notices that when the bubbles popped, they carried a bit of the smoke down heavy, like low. And so he was like, oh, this gas that's in these bubbles is heavier than air.
Mm-hmm.
it was carbon dioxide. And it was like trapped air, I think is what they were calling it. But
which is not inaccurate.
Right, it is essentially trapped air. Mm-hmm. So apparently he went to, again, I think it was like the British Board of Physicians, or British Health Organization.
It was the British again.
Yeah, the
it's
WHO.
always with the British.
Well, they were very powerful. And so, I mean, to be honest, in a lot of ways, we owe a lot to the British, as far as modernization.
We owe a lot and we can blame a lot.
Yes, we do. So he went there and he won a big award because he was like, well, clearly this is medicinal because, everything new apparently once upon a time was medicinal. They're like, this is good for us.
Yeah, because it lends an air of respectability.
Yes, and because of the air of respectability, they were able to take soda water and turn it into, pharmacy water, essentially. They were selling it at the apothecaries, and they were mixing in stuff, and it was all health drinks.
And then the soda fountain.
I love a soda fountain.
Yes.
I wish we still had soda
We
fountains.
do. Actually, there's not as in vogue.
Hold on, we're opening soda.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. I thought we were bringing our favorites. So I brought Cherry Coke, which I Googled, and is actually a modern relevation. Actually, Coca-Cola. The old pharmacist used to add cherry syrup, and Coca-Cola was like, hey, we can make money off that, and it's delicious.
So with Pemberton, he was trying to make a headache
cure-all.
Yes. Panacea.
Yes.
And stumbled upon this very concentrated syrup. And that's what made them successful.
Upon it.
That's what made them successful, though, is that they didn't serve it as like a beverage in total.
They didn't can it. They
sold
just
syrup.
Give you the syrup, and you can add your own soda water. And that's what made them successful.
I'm going to see that sometimes I go to like an establishment and I get a Coke and it's all syrup or it's all water and I'm grumpy.
Yeah, the ratio is very
They still do that
important.
today. They still serve the syrup. And then the company or whatever adds the water. Well, still today.
He wasn't stumbling upon it. He knew that cola leaves, I think it's a cola bean, had caffeine in it. He knew it.
Cola. It was coca bean and cola leaf.
Okay, yeah, and they both increased attentiveness, and then of course cocaine, which increased alertness. And he mixed it. He just made the syrup, and then he brought it to pharmacists.
But it had wine at first.
I don't remember having wine.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, remember? Because there was the whole, Georgia, tested the temperance.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, fuck, what are we going to... I'll just take the wine out.
It was coca wine. You're right.
Yeah,
yes. And in Georgia...
Did we read the same book?
We did not read the same book.
It feels like I don't remember any of that.
You know what it feels like? It feels like maybe you tried to get the book in within 24 hours.
I did. I read it within like an 8-hour period, but I don't remember that. And also, you don't remember stories that I remember very distinctly from the book.
Because you got them from other books.
No, it's the same freaking book.
Well, Georgia dabbled in prohibition apparently for 24 months.
They dabbled.
And then
and decided it was not for them.
And he was like, oh crap, my cocoa wine is not going to work.
He
was like, let's mix it with soda.
They talked about that in the book that I read, which apparently was different than the book that you read. But they were saying that that's why Coca-Cola did so well, is because it was like during that time period where there was no alcohol to compete with it. Well, and then it had set its stone, whatever, and then the alcohol came in, and when the alcohol came in, it was already sure-footed in. It was already part of the,
American fabric.
The society. So people were like, yeah, we'll do this and we'll do that. We'll do it all. We have some wine and we have some Coca-Cola. It's fantastic.
So, let's just bring it back to basic. We're now entering the part of world history and beverages where soda water came into play. And we've all brought a carbonated beverage to share. Marcia brought Cherry Coke because it's her favorite.
Yes.
Michelle forgot to bring something, so I stole this from Nate. It's Cola O, 0 calorie ONG.
And for the record,
0 cost.
Knowing Nate as I do, being his fiance, Cola O is just as good as Coke Zero.
Right. Well, that's a whole different thing.
I feel like that is
pushing out other Coke representatives.
I feel like that's possibly incorrect, but the thing about Cola O is that I found interesting when I decided to steal this from you instead of going to the convenience store to buy my own Coke, or rather soda water, which is what I was originally going to do, is that Coca-Cola became, or cola, as in the book, became the name for any brown soda.
Brown syrup.
Based off of Coca-Cola.
I'm not a Coke drinker. I'm not a soda drinker, which is what I usually call it, soda, because carbonation gives me hiccups, and not like cute hiccups. It's like, like it hurts my chest. Yeah, very violent hiccups. Which hiccups, interestingly enough, I would like to see the history in this. If any of our listeners are history buffs, I have seen the spelling where it's hic coughs. Like spelled like OGFH, where it's like a hiccup. Anyways, carbonation gives me the hiccups.
Yeah.
So the only reason why I have a carbonated beverage to share is because if it weren't for this podcast, I would be in the middle of dry January. Also known as Veganuary.
It's a huge sacrifice that she's making for us by drinking wine and beer and spirits.
And so I have gotten into, because we're also in the middle of a pandemic. Let's not forget that. And
what does that do there?
Well, I mean, I've just become a little more reliant on inebriants. I can't have those. I can't have those in dry January.
Sure.
And so I bought myself Kin, which is a functional beverage for modern rituals.
It's Kin, not Ken, like the Barbie doll boyfriend.
Right.
It's Kin, like
he has no place.
This is my brother, a can of soda water
and
with bitters.
It says ready to drink. Mind your mood. It is caffeine free and the recommended use. A wind down beverage to calm the mind.
So I'm going to be
mellow the mood.
I tried that. There's none of that stuff.
Serve chill. So that's what I'm drinking right now.
I tried one of those, and I'm telling you, it's better with gin.
Oh, Kin and Gin.
Or Kin Gin.
Oh, that's the name of our next. When we go back to our regular
but
format.
We're not doing gin this year. This year for our podcast, we're doing rum, right?
Because rum was so... Okay, so...
We didn't even talk about that.
Rewind. Be kind. We're going to rewind. We had already decided, because we know, listeners, that it has been such a hardship for
It's really not about you. It's about us.
Nobody drinks with us.
No one does.
No one drinks with us.
It's heartbreaking. It hurts my heart.
We post the tutorials. We post the recipes, but nobody is drinking with us. And we have to assume it's not because we're not charming.
I feel like the entire British naval fleet could get on board with the
Someone
Grog.
out there, please tell them they need to listen to Book Eaters.
Where's the British naval fleet?
But in the meantime,
we need them.
But in the meantime, we're going to assume that you don't drink with us because it's too expensive.
It's too hard
and
to
you need
keep up.
us to commit to one spirit.
We're committing to a spirit.
And so tonight, we're committing to a spirit.
Rum,
because it was such a big feature in this book.
Yeah, and it's
so
delicious.
For the
we
rest of the season,
left it up to Marcia, and she chose rum.
And for the rest of the season, which we have not recorded,
it's 100% Marcia's fault,
and for which we have not, crafted any drinks.
No.
Every drink that we have will have rum in it. So go buy your bottle of rum right now.
Whichever rum you like.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't even fucking matter. It doesn't have to be Sailor's rum.
I mean, it should be a rum that
Honestly,
you like.
that rum is way too strong. Don't do it.
It's very strong rum.
Stay away from that rum. That rum is intoxicating.
Poor sailing, temperature rum. It's good warm, so I see why they liked it.
Also, why would you don't drink so heavily when you sail?
I mean, I would love to hoist. I feel like the only way I could hoist a sail or any number of things would be with rum.
Do you feel like the word hoist is too close to the word moist?
Mm-mm. I feel like it's just far enough
it's
apart.
One consonant away.
It's one consonant. It's just the one consonant
that
away.
That will be the t-shirt. One consonant away.
All right, so we've talked about, let's do the rundown here. Beer.
Mm-hmm.
Wine.
Mm-hmm.
Spirits.
Mm-hmm.
Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Tea.
Mm-hmm.
And cola.
Okay, based on the book.
Those are the 6 drinks.
Based on the book, what was your favorite?
Based on the book? Mm-hmm. You want me to separate my own personal preferences from the book?
It's too hard. So, based on the book, what was your favorite knowledge
Absolutely tea. Tea absolutely blew my mind. Like, it's crazy to me that people, like, went to such lengths for such a luxury. Like, it's not even like they needed it. You know, they just liked it.
Like tea doesn't.
I felt like it was coffee.
And
Mercy
the fact
doesn't
that
understand tea.
I felt like coffee woke us up.
I absolutely understand tea, and
I
I
need
enjoy,
tea in my life.
No, I absolutely enjoy tea. As a matter of fact, I had to cut tea out because it was too addictive.
Oh my god, you cut tea?
I did. Well, I did in the afternoon because I was having a headache like every day. I was like really into tea, and I was
Did
like,
you just have a slide back because of the green tea?
No, but I did have to like
This is
take
her
it out of my
methadone.
daily routine. But I mean, to me, it was just so nasty. It was such a nasty business.
Yeah,
the
the
fact
India
that
tea
like,
company, yeah.
I mean, it was just capitalism, like completely like stripped bare. And I know America gets a lot of blame for its capitalistic endeavors, but I mean, the British India Tea Company, my God, they were like, we like tea and we don't care what happens to you. We want tea and we can't grow it, so we're going to do whatever we have to do.
I don't think that they cared about. I think the East India Company is not about tea. I think they were mostly about profit.
Money.
And they were like, fuck whatever it takes to get the profit. The English people want tea.
Right, well, that's what I'm
We
saying.
are the only person that can provide the tea for you. So we have the
was-
monopoly on tea, and so therefore we're going to do whatever we have to do to make sure that's advertised properly to you,
But
and that we get it to you in the cheapest and most effective way possible.
The entire
and to help
company
everyone
was
else.
based on tea, though.
That's what I love
Yeah.
about you, though, Marcia. You love knowledge, even if it causes pain.
There was a lot of pain in this book. Like the rum chapter was the hardest for me with regard to the pain, but I feel like the tea was the most interesting to me, and then the beer, because those are things I love. I love tea and I love beer.
I feel like coffee was the most interesting because it did not induce pain.
It was the least trauma-inducing of all
That's
the beverages.
that's what I.
Well, not
Cola.
I mean, beer,
Cola wasn't
beer.
That's
that.
the litmus
Coke
test for
wasn't
me
that
in life.
trauma-inducing.
Is whatever is the.
I felt like the most damaging beverage of all was definitely tea, and I felt really bad for.
I didn't ask you what was most damaging. I asked you what you most enjoyed. So
I did enjoy that the most.
That's
though,
revealing.
because it was
Like,
like
I like the pain. I'm in for the pain.
it was the most mind-opening. I was like, my God, poor China. I mean, I just felt so bad for China, and I had no idea that.
Also-
I mean, I knew British imperialism was bad.
Did it-
Quotation marks. But
Air
like,
quotes
I
you
didn't
just
really
did.
Did it feel
understand-
like a little bit like the author was implying that if it wasn't for the East India Tea Company, we would still be under British control here in the States?
Well, I
Did it
felt
not feel like a little bit like he was saying that? He was like, and if it hadn't been for this company,
Mr.
we probably would have
Standish,
just
you have
been
a
like,
lot
it's
to
cool, we
answer
won't
for.
tax it. And then we would still be part of Britain. Did it feel like a little bit like that?
I didn't feel like that at all. I actually
Oh,
felt like
okay.
America was very much like, we're done with the British Tea Company. They're like, you know what? You're over there, we're over here. And I thought it was pretty cool and badass, generally, of America to be like, you know what? We're done with you guys.
Doesn't matter because you brought us a great topic for our inaugural season 3 episode. We are going to finish the rest of the drinks that we had tonight.
I have so many left.
So many left.
I'm still
But in the
intoxicated.
meantime, we will look forward to episode 2.
Yes.
And while you wait,
Eat the books, motherfucker.
That's how we always close our episodes.